How do you make a case when your leadership has strong opinions about your roadmap that you don't agree with? Today, we're going to look at a completely made up case study and hear from product managers about how they approach decision making, prioritization, and managing up, especially when there are some controversial items on the roadmap. So take a look at the case study, and then we'll be back to hear about how you and other product managers might solve this dilemma.
My name is Vander Ven. My full name is Johanna Marie, and Joey is just a lot more fun and easier for people to say. Today for our session, I would like to first go over why the topic, what really brought this on. Then we can dive into the fictional case study. So to tell you a little bit about myself, when I started in product management, I was a product owner, and there wasn't really a very strong product management organization in the company where I was working. And I really was kind of trying to figure out for myself, how do I better prioritize, even different stories, and having to defend those decisions of whether or not one story is above another and why, and give that kind of explanation. And I thought, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so I came up with like a formula to try to use. And I know that there's other methods that people have used in the past. And even Jason shared with me his 60-second business case, which is one of the resources I put in. I think that's very interesting. One of the problems that I had while I was trying to create that formula is that there's what I understand to be the order just based on the knowledge that I have acquired versus, here I am with this formula, and the formula is not lining up with my thinking. Then as the company was getting more and more product management organization, I had a leader then. And so then it came clear to me that even for leaders and understanding what items, just like in this image, right? What items move forward? Which ones do you not choose, and why? And how do you help the business make better decisions there? So in this example, this is, I've been new, shiny, new, sparkly coming in. And when you already see that for the roadmap, there's plenty of other work going on here. And then you have these new items that you have to try to fit in, or you have to shuffle around, and being able to help the business make those decisions on what should be taken out, like that seems to be an area where, at least for myself, I want to learn more. I'm really curious, what can we do to make this easier? This whole, we understand maybe what we need to be doing, but we're not always able to explain it maybe, or even maybe we don't know and we want to have, better tools in our toolkit to leverage. So that's kind of the why. So this brings me to the case study. So this is a fictional case study. It is completely, I'm not in the carshop.com. I work for Equifax, so this is not my realm of things. Just trying to use this as an example to help the activity. So your title is you are CPO of carshop.com. And the mission of carshop.com, similar to the Carvanas and the CarMaxes of the world, is making buying used cars so fast and so easy that customers never want to go to a dealership again. And the business model for carshop.com is that you want to sell on a quick turnaround, a high volume of cars for a medium profit margin. So that's your world. Then you have one team, this is, short term, you have one team for putting new cars into the website, and there's only time for one project to be completed to launch for the peak car sales season that starts in March. Now you got some choices here. We have Hellcats. So CPO, your CEO, went to an automobile investor presentation this month. And in that presentation, it was shared that the Dodge Hellcats average per unit net margin has grown 30% year over year, even with sales falling. Based on this information, the CEO, who is a huge car fan, wants to put Hellcats into the carshop.com website. So that's one option, with that one team that can put in something before sales start picking up for cars. Option 2, Teslas. So Tesla's in the market. However, from a popular business journal, they saw that there were other car selling sites that were having fewer and fewer cars available for sale. Maybe this indicates that this isn't a great place to be. However, your product manager wants to sell Tesla sedans and Tesla trucks in the future. Consumer trends toward electric vehicles are increasing per a top 5 economic consultant group. This suggests that Teslas could be more profitable for the company long term. So the choice. With your group, you can discuss between the two options, Tesla or Dodge Hellcat, to be putting into the website and determine the course of action you as CPO of carshop.com will take. As I mentioned, please make sure to put it in the session notes so you can have it documented, as well as choose someone for the playback. The questions to consider: which would you choose, Hellcats or Teslas? And what criteria helps you defend your choice to the CEO as well as the product manager? Because either way, probably someone's idea is not moving forward, and you have to help them understand why. Okay.
So there you have it. What do you think? How would you handle this situation? In a few minutes, we're going to hear from several other product managers at Product Coffee about how they approach making the decision and how they would approach taking their strategy to the organization and building buy-in for their approach. But before we do that, I'd like you to drop down into the comments below and give us your thoughts. What advice would you give to a product manager who's facing this exact same dilemma?
So as a team, we chose the Tesla, right? So some of the comments was fast-growing market. There is an opportunity for an early mover advantage. We felt like there was stability with respect to the Tesla line, because they've rolled down through traditional sedan-based vehicles. They're expanding to trucks, SUVs. And so that gives an advantage to that decision for two things. One, you have an expanding product line that allows you to continually resell to your customers. So if you build some customer loyalty, you can upgrade that customer from a small sedan to a larger sedan, or if they have kids, or that buyer starts to have children, you can add the SUV, and then you could, of course, hit the point where they do trade-ins and they want to get the next generation Tesla. There were some concerns about the accessibility to that inventory. Would we be able to secure a sufficient portion of that inventory? That was probably one of the bigger comments I picked up. There was one point that was made about the Hellcat decision, is that it too could provide some market expansion opportunities into other types of muscle cars. There was concern about the availability of the inventory, but the margins were attractive. And one point was made was the concern was that promoting Tesla over Hellcat kind of puts you at odds with the view of the CEO, and taking on a major project like this, an important project of this, and not having that level of executive alignment could be potentially risky. But as a group, we voted for the Tesla.
Okay. And I know that you already mentioned some of those key points of what helped you kind of defend that choice. Would you mind just summarizing maybe just a little bit of what you would say, to defend it to the CEO and the product manager? Obviously, if you're picking Tesla, the product manager is going to be on your side. So how are you going to defend the choice, I guess, for the CEO?
Anybody on the team want to take that, or I'm happy to do it? All right, I'll do it.
So I'm the CEO. How are you convincing me that Teslas are the way?
Yeah. So no, the convincing would be get in early and get a toehold on a market that will have the product expansion opportunities that will give us multiple upsell opportunities and resell opportunities to a loyal customer base.
Okay.
And I'm really focused. I really want to focus on this other question. Anybody from the team is able to answer it as well. So Mark and Team 11, what advice do you have for others when they're facing these kinds of controversial roadmap choices? What's the what's the insight that you can take away, or that somebody could take away from this conversation to help them when they're dealing with this situation in the real world?
I know from my practical experience, and what we discussed internally was, we start making assumptions about a lot of things, right? And so one of the practices that we have in our organization is to try to get the data points together. So from my experience at Siemens, we do focus on making a lot of business-driven decisions on valid data, right? So what is the availability of inventory? What kind of relationship can actually be established with the vendors such as Tesla? What is the market segmentation for muscle cars, particularly Hellcats? So there's just a lot of data points that could be acquired to make that decision. And then, but then again, from my personal perspective, the politics are very important. I've led a lot of different initiatives where seems like a really good idea, but if there's not the right executive sponsorship behind it, doesn't matter how good the idea is. Oftentimes those initiatives can flame out very quickly, even though you have the good business data points behind them. So that internal selling job to get an executive to actually stand up and say, this is the right thing to do, this is how we need to go forward, is probably critical for the success of the product and the projects.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, team. Who else wants to take a go?
I'll go ahead. This is Chuck.
Okay.
I don't know what our team number was, but it was Mark Isbitz, Scott Billington, and Star Scott with me. So we started from a kind of similar premise. So, given that the company is profitable, given that we have the financial runway for the interim, then we believe moving towards Tesla is a better deal, given the growth in the market, long-term trends, and the range of cars that it's coming out. However, that said, depending on what we do or do not know about runway and finances, we would probably decision tree this out with some high-low options for each decision. If we need money now and inventory is an issue, then the Hellcat may be the best way to go first, and then transitions into Tesla after the car buying season is slowed down so we can work on sourcing and other pieces. But depending on how much insight we have from the CEO, assuming we don't have a ton, we'd throw both back, go back to the CEO, who obviously has kind of a shiny preference, and our PM manager, and say, here are the high lows for each option, giving various scenarios. What is the company's position? Where do you need us to be to support so that we can meet the objectives of the company with the product piece on there? And I think it could go kind of either way, depending on a number of factors. So that's kind of where low knowledge, let's make the CEO make that decision based on objectives or give us the insight to provide. Or if we know more, then we will use the same tree to buffer our position, but given them the alternative paths. So if the CEO, for example, is really wedded to the Hellcats, we can have that decision without looking like we're standing in his or her way.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Real quickly, I'm going to ask, as people jump out, as people start to drop, I'm going to keep this going for a few minutes, but as you start to drop, please run over to the resources page that we shared earlier and hit that survey before you go. I'd really like your feedback on today's session. And Joey, you were going to say something. I see Jessica's got her hand up as well. So Joey, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to, ask him about the third question, but I think it's a good point since we do have just about 1 or 2 minutes left, so thank you for bringing that up, that survey. I'm personally looking forward to getting, some sort of insight on how people like the session, what was super valuable for them. Definitely loves the opportunity, and thank you, Jason, for it.
You bet. Absolutely. This has been a great session, and I would like for anybody who can continue kind of discussing this to stick around. And if you can't, I'll have the recording and I'll share it with everyone who came. I'll have the output available for you to kind of watch if you had to leave early. So Chuck, did you have a final shot on that question number 3? What advice you have for others when facing controversial roadmap choices?
Really, it's all about what information do you have? What information do you believe? So this is just my 2 cents on there is, the less information you have, the more collaborative you have to be in diagramming what the possible tracks of reality are. The more clarity you have on the goals you need to meet, then it's about getting buy-in from everybody on what are our clear now, short-term, and mid-term goals so that we can make the best decision we can for the environment, and then how do we adjust to improve over time. I hope that was nice and vague and pithy.
Vague and pithy. It's a winning combination. Jessica, you've got your hand up.
Hi, so I represent Team 8, and what we decided is that we did not have enough quantitative or qualitative information to make a decision. So we recommend that we assume that there's Google Analytics so that we could go back and look and see what cars have been searched for the most in the last 3 months. So we get information from our current prospects and customers. We'd also recommend both a survey on our website with a few key questions to understand people's income, what they're seeking, how they plan to use the car. We'd also like to use a off-website survey to get additional information. We expect the surveys would be written by our design or UX team so that they could remove bias as much as possible. And we expect this effort to take 2 weeks. And we assume that we have that 2 weeks in order to pull together the data to substantiate both what the demand is and then compare that with the supply information as well. So we would be carrying that out. So that's where Team 8 stands.
Great.
Did I miss anything,
Awesome.
team?
Nope, nailed it.
No, I think you got it. So we haven't selected Hellcats or Teslas, but we're looking for what may be a third option. We'd also like to know what the CEO drives.
I think his dream is for the Hellcat if he doesn't have one yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to switch over to. Oh, go
Hey,
ahead.
I was going to
Yeah,
go.
go ahead.
Is there time?
You do.
Is there time?
Who's that speaking?
This is John.
Yeah, we've got
John.
time. I was gonna reach over to Damon real quick, and then Charlie, and then you, if that's okay, John.
Yeah.
Okay, Damon, you're up.
Hey everyone. So we went with the Tesla. Our thinking being, I mean, really kind of the mission of the company, right, is to be the car of the people. And so when you look at a niche market like a muscle car versus an expanding EV market, we think that this is an option that's going to become just more and more affordable for everyone. You do some quick research. I mean, Teslas are coming down to the 40,000 range, whereas Hellcats 60 plus. So it feels like it's a trend that's going to continue as people get more and more into the EV market. So we think it's high growth, it has a good potential for sales, and kind of buys more into a long-term vision, which I think this point was already made. Like, the company's profitable. So even though we want to be selling cars in March, we don't have to be almost desperate, right, to create sales. We can have more of a long-term focus to generate those sales. And then our caveats, kind of similar to what others, it's like have said. I mean, there are potential supply chain issues with Tesla. And then just also probably the next 12 to 24 months, there's going to be a lot of competitive increase in the landscape for EV, right? All the major car brands are going to be launching their own. There's tons of EV startups. So everyone might want an EV, but it might look different. Like Tesla might not be the unicorn that it is now. So, and then probably just to address a couple of the questions on Jason's slide in terms of advice for controversial choices or just a key point from the breakout, I would probably answer that with one point, which was brought up by Amanda, which is ask good questions. And so in these two options, right, it's pretty easy just to kind of go down the list, regardless of your brand affinity, and say, you know, what questions do I have about Hellcat? Like, what is it? Or, you know, what questions do I have about Tesla? And just really walk through each one so that you're kind of getting out of the mindset of being, oh, I love Tesla, it has to be Tesla. Like, really ask good questions, even if you're familiar with your options.
Excellent. That's a great feedback.
Love it.
And great advice. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's see. We had Charlie Smiley. You still with us, Charlie?
I'm here. I'm not sure what group number I was, but it was myself, John, Steve, and Jerry. We actually went contrarian route. I'm going to answer question number 4 first. What is one key point you learned during the breakouts? I learned we had 3 different options, and we were going to either launch the Hellcat, launch the Tesla, or launch both. So between 4 of us, we came up with 3 different options. So I think it it shows that there's no right answer. And hearing everybody here, we actually went with the Hellcat. We went with the Hellcat for a couple of reasons. I'll give you the methodology. Is that there's a declining production. This is a used car site. There is a declining production in new cars for Hellcats. The Hellcats have been in the market for 5 years, so it's probably got a pretty robust used car market. And with demand, or with new cars going down, you may have a higher demand for enthusiasts for these cars on a used car site. The Teslas concerned us because both of the competitive sites showed a huge decrease. One showed a huge decrease in Tesla sales or Tesla listings, and one didn't have. One had a very steady Tesla listings, and it was declining. And then one had a roller coaster ride of Tesla listings, and then it sharply declined. We made an assumption, which is another thing we have to do as product people, is that the decline in the last part was due to COVID, people buying less used cars. We're not sure what the huge decline was in 2019, but that's something we have to research. We also need that competitive analysis for the Hellcats to confirm our proposal. We do believe, though, that this is a short-term and long-term play. The company's not about getting cashing out, so that we believe we're going to do both, but in the tight time frame that we have, we're going to do Hellcats for the March launch, but then we're going to bring on somebody, either an innovative product manager internal or some outside consultant, to explore Tesla long-term. We do believe with current events, a Democratic administration will lead to a increase in EVs. Like I think Damien mentioned as well, there'll be a lot more being produced, but we believe a Democratic administration will be pushing that more. So we think short-term, you do Hellcats, prove the data, get the competitive analysis, make sure it syncs up. And then Tesla, then while we're doing that, we do it in dual path. We implement the Hellcats, and then we look at the Teslas long-term for the next phase.
Great. Anything else to add from anyone on that team?
Any advice?
No, I think it's about the data. You just have to provide the data, and you can say if he's hell bent on Hellcats, sorry, but you got to say, look, here's the data for it, and we can make this decision, but data's hard to. I mean, data can be manipulated, but true data, if put into a unbiased view, if that's the decision he makes, and our assumptions are true that there's a robust market, used car market for these things, then we just need to prove that out. We need that. We're missing that picture, but once we have it, we give it to him and say, we're assuming there's a robust market. And there's some other things in there too, like with the margin, things like that. But I think that's the biggest thing, is just the data and building the case for it and proving it to him whether it's a bad idea or a good idea.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, team. Let's see, we got John is up next. John, you still with us?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, I don't know what group we were in, but it was Denise and myself, and we basically went with Tesla. Long story short for that is basically, I think you have to look at what your business model is, which is quick turnaround, high volume. And if you're looking into the future, where, not where the hockey puck is now, but where is it going to be 3 or 5 years from now, and looking at the demand and the increase of electric cars, that fits into your business model. It's going to require some investment. So all your factory, not your factories, but your storage facilities and where this is, you're going to have to install electric charging stations. You're going to have to figure out how you transport these vehicles. So it is an investment, but are you talking about, do you want to be relevant 3 or 5 years from now, or do you want to be like where Nokia was in 2000, right? So that was kind of where we were thinking. The Teslas, even though right now they may not necessarily align with the part of the business model with high volume, it sets you up to support further the movement of electric vehicles, whether it's Nikola, Ford, GM, all these, everyone's kind of racing this market, and it feels, based on the demand, a little better than what the hydrogen cars and electric cars were in the 90s. So that was kind of, you don't have to, there is an investment there. So you have to go out and research it. And is this the right time to make that investment? But you don't want to be caught with your pants down and you're like, oh, we got to get an electric. Well, we don't have, agreements to have all these charging stations in our factories, how we transport them, how we service them. So it just makes sense to prepare for that now if you're looking down the future. The other problem we have with Hellcats is Hellcats are going to have a slower turnover. So if you've got your agreements put in place, now you have that Hellcat taking up inventory that could have been selling, 10 Honda Accords by the time you sold one Hellcat. So great, it sold for 30% more profit margin, but we could have made more revenue and profit if we sold 10 Accords in that time. So that's some data we need to validate. That's an assumption. Other things that kind of came into play was, what kind of insurance do you have? So, if you're insuring, and it probably comes in with Teslas too, but if you're insuring cars to that 0 to 50, 60,000 range, and now you're insuring different cars, how do you transport them, things like that? Does it require special, so the whole supply chain disruption. Do you have to, so, those are one of the things, like, it doesn't really fit with your business model. So if you want to go down this path, you almost need like a separate company that does it, like a company that sells Ferraris versus a company, a Honda shop, an Acura shop versus, so you kind of get into that a little bit, which increases your cost. And then the last thing that came up is politics. If the Democrats start taking over, are you going to start seeing increased taxes on some of these cars, increased gas tax? Are you going to start seeing some of this, the things we saw with the Nissan Leaf, where you could pretty much get one for free here in the state of Georgia because of all the tax rebates? So is that going to drive some of the future growth? So ultimately, we think Teslas are the best way for them to go to be relevant 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, and that's kind of where we landed.
So to genericize that last bit, looking at the economic and political environment around the whole question is a key decision factor in deciding which way to go, especially looking at the political climate and how that might impact demand for products.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people here work in healthcare, and we're just constantly monitoring what the heck is CMS going to do next, and how is that going to impact, what clinical data is going to be required, what patient data is going to be required, how's that going to impact the cost of our customers. It's something you always got to look at because it's going to drive consumer behavior.
Excellent. Great.
Any advice? You have for others?
I struggled with this a lot working with smaller companies where the CEO gets hell bent, to use Charlie's words, on something. You got to find a way to politically take them back to what's your business model and where do you want to be 3 to 5 years from now. If you don't do that, you'll find yourself chasing something that ultimately it's never going to be the CEO's fault. It's going to be your fault.
Very true. Awesome.
All right. Do we have anybody else who wants to give it a go? I think we've captured all the raised hands. We got a few people hanging on here to the end. Anyone have anything to add, or just some advice when you're facing this, even if you don't want to add anything on your team's choice? What are some thoughts around how you would approach this problem, or recommend a product manager approach this problem?
Ask a lot of questions, like we did here.
Yeah, there were a lot of great questions early on to kind of get as much information as you could.
Yeah, because quite often you're not going to have all the answers, so you're going to have to make assumptions. And I would say that's the other one, is what I try to do is my first slide when I present something like this is assumptions. Make sure everyone agrees with the assumptions so that they understand that these decisions were made with the available data.
Yep.
Hey, Jason. I think our group didn't go yet. So it was me, Shilan, Kelly, and Eric, I think.
Okay.
And we, so our assumptions were that we already have Teslas and other electric vehicles on our website. And we also made an assumption that our research shows that the number 2 buyers of electric vehicles are previous muscle car owners. So long term, long term, it does make sense to try to be the number 1 platform for used electric cars, and that's what we want. But in the short term, since this was just for that March peak season, we decided to go for the Hellcat. Hellcat availabilities are high, margins are high. The only thing we don't know is that we haven't really validated that customer demand, because sales are falling. So that's something that we didn't know and we would want to research into. We also know that in a couple of years, Hellcat owners will definitely be tired of maintenance costs, because it's a Dodge, it's going to break down, as well as fuel costs. So that gives us a good play into marketing to those folks. Hey, you can just buy an electric car from us again. So that's what we went with.
That's really a great response. I noticed a couple of the teams did identify that while this was a prioritization choice about what do we do now, you didn't exclude the reality of prioritization is what do we do now? And then what do we do next? It wasn't a what do we not do question necessarily. So I think a couple of the teams did, your team as well, said, we're going to do Hellcats now because we have to make a choice for the March season. But at the same time, we've got a long-term growth plan that Tesla's really help us out with, so that you didn't exclude Tesla's. You said, we're just going to do that a little bit later because the growth pattern is going to come on it a little bit later.
Yeah, and if you don't sell the Hellcats, the CEO can take them. I mean, he can pay for them. He loves them so much.
There you go. There you go. So any other advice that you have for Joey or anyone facing this type of a challenge?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give to people is to try to always bring it back to the customer. We faced this situation, I think, yesterday in one of our leadership meetings. And, you know, when you have a website that's accessible to anyone with a click, you're always going to get people who are like, oh, I just went to the website and, you know, I just wanted to pass this along. And then when a leader does that, that can be like a fire situation, like where does this fall on the roadmap? But it's always good to tell them that, hey, you know, a regular customer will pretty much never get that scenario, or, you know, here's why it's so far behind on our rear view mirror, but we understand it's a problem. I think the best sentence I've usually heard is, yeah, we got stories in the backlog for this. And then, you know, put that to the side. We'll get to it when we get to it. Because most of the time people are just checking if you're aware of it, and yeah, I'm aware of it.
One of the things that I heard you implicitly allude to in your comment there, Anthony, was part of the answer is being able to turn around very quickly and say, here's my market, here's what's really going on with my larger customer base. I understand my customer base, and the situation that you're describing right now is not common for my customer base. So I prioritized other things higher based on actual demand.
Yep. So that, you know, really goes back to like how connected you are to your metrics, and, you know, how disciplined you are in looking at that on a regular cadence. That should give you the answer that, oh, I don't, or if it doesn't fall into any of your regular metrics, then you could just say, I got stories in the backlog, I'll take a look into it later. Key point you learned during the breakouts. I think the key point, we did explore third option, the fourth option. The third option was to sell both, and the fourth option was to sell neither. But we came back and selected the Hellcat. That's it.
Excellent. That's great, Anthony. Thank you so much. That's it for this week. I hope you had a great time, and I hope you left your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to have you join us live each week for Product Coffee, so sign up for our newsletter using the link in the description below, and we'll see you next week.